right, can everybody see my screen? I think we're good. So again, gardening with cover crops. So very basic. I'm sure most of you know what a cover crop is, but just in case, a cover crop is a crop that is grown for the protection and enrichment of the soil that will not be harvested. So cover crops can be planted spring, summer, winter, just whenever you are needing that protection for your soil and when you don't have something else growing. So I wanted to start first off, and if you've joined any of the other meetings in this series, I know we have talked about soil health principles, and I just wanted to bring them up again before I got started and too detailed into cover crops, because cover crops play a part in all 4 of our soil health principles. So the first one we can talk about is minimizing disturbance. So in a lot of garden systems, it's very common to see a lot of tillage. That's happened for a long time. I mean, my grandparents tilled, my mom and dad still till their garden, even though I've tried to convince them otherwise. Not a bad thing, but the good news is cover crops can do the tillage for us. Because they have such thick fibrous root systems, they can add oxygen back to our soil, they can improve infiltration with their root systems, and they also, when they feed our biology and our earthworms and all those living creatures in our soil come back, they're also tilling the soil for us and breaking it up and creating that aggregation that we want without actual tillage with some type of equipment. So we also want continuous living roots in the soil all year long. So, and this is, a lot of these are going to be repeat benefits. So we're improving infiltration, we're building those soil aggregates like you can see in these pictures. We really want our soil to look like a cottage cheese, like chocolate cake texture. So there's a lot of pore space and oxygen in our soil. Those roots also provide food and habitat for our soil biology, and they can help break up compaction. A lot of times in our gardens, from continued tillage or just from walking on it a lot or planting when it's wet, compaction can be a big issue. So having some sort of root system in there can help break up that compaction. And those living roots can also lessen the effects of erosion. So when we get big heavy rains, typically our soil is exposed in a lot of gardening system, whereas these cover crops have a lot of foliage. They're covering that soil and they lessen the impact of the rain on the soil. And cover crops also help us maximize the biodiversity. When we're in our gardens, or especially large crop or ag systems, you typically only see corn and soybeans and maybe wheat. And even in our gardens, it can get that way. Some of us may only do like squash and sweet corn and tomatoes. So there's not very much diversity in our gardens, but when we add in cover crops and we do multi-species cover crops, we can add in a lot of different species that do a lot of different things. So the plants might not only have a value, or the cover crops might not only have value for our cash crop for the following year, but can also have value for our pollinators and beneficial insects. And the last one is maximizing soil cover. So you can see the bottom picture, the soil is just dried out and cracked and it's crusted on the top. When our soil is covered, we're not going to have those types of issues because our cover crops are going to help lessen the effects of erosion, which that bottom picture is going to show like sheet and reel erosion. It's also going to regulate the moisture and the temperature. So when our soil dries out, it's not going to crack like that because the cover crops are going to help retain that moisture and keep the soil from getting as hot. And then again, it also provides really great habitat for our soil biology and our insects. Our soil biology is kind of just like us. It doesn't really like it when it's super hot. It likes those 50 to 70 degree temperatures. So if we can keep that soil moisture and temperature right where it is, they're going to thrive and be a lot happier. So I know some of us probably have chickens or goats or some livestock, but if you don't, you still are a livestock farmer. I always love to tell everybody this, and they don't always think about it that way, but there are millions of, well, probably billions of organisms in our soil that we don't know about, that we don't see, that we don't think about on a regular basis. But by adding cover crops to our soil and following these soil health principles, we're feeding that livestock in our soil, which then is helping feed our plants in our garden and helping those things thrive. So this is just kind of an example of all the different things that are in our soil, and then even adding in like some of the mammals and birds that we might be helping towards the end also. So if you've seen Stephanie's presentation before, I know she had discussed the rainfall simulator, and I just wanted to throw these pictures in there just to show kind of the difference between ground that has had the soil health principles applied on them and has a cover crop compared to a soil that has no cover crop and has been conventionally tilled. So some of these pictures can be a little hard to see, but this is a table that you set up and it has a hose nozzle on the top of it. And so you can watch and measure the amount of rain that comes down on both of these trays of soil. And as you can see, the picture on the far left, the cover crop tray has, you can see the container in the back has the most water in it, and that's because that water has infiltrated down into that soil through the cover crop roots and through the earthworm channels. And so all that water will be available to the plants that are in that soil. Whereas the tray that's conventionally tilled with no cover crops that's on the left, there is no water that has infiltrated. And there also is water that is run off and is causing some erosion that's in the front container, which is kind of cut off in the picture, so it's a little difficult to see. But this is just kind of a visual of why our soil health principles are so important. So we get a lot of questions with cover crops, and people say that they just don't fit. It's not going to work for what I have. I don't know how. I just don't think it matches my goals. So I wanted to be here to tell you that cover crops can fit in any system. They're very versatile. There's so many amounts of species. They really just can work their way into any garden. So whether you're a market gardener and you sell to farmers markets, if you just have a small backyard garden that just feeds your family, cut flower beds or even landscaping, and then raised beds also. And I think one that a lot of people don't think about is orchards. If you have some apple trees, pear trees, even just other perennials like berries, they're going to work fantastic in those same areas. So I guess just really quick before we start to move on to some of the meat and potatoes, is there any questions? I can check the chat really quick.
So Bree, we don't really have a lot of questions yet, just some good conversation about different things that are added to people's gardens, manure and leaf mulch and bedding straw and different things like that. So just some discussion kind of going on about what people are adding to their garden if they don't add cover crops.
All righty. I like to hear that. Okay, so on to cover crop selection. So this can be the part that's a little overwhelming to some because there are so many different types of cover crops out there. And even through my presentation, I'm not going to go over a ton of them. There's still a lot out there. There's a lot out there that I have not experimented with to know a ton of details on them. But I think the biggest thing that I look for when I'm trying to find a cover crop is just focusing on my goals for the following year. So that could be anything from wanting a higher yield out of your vegetables, improving your soil health, or just trying to save money. So you could create your own mulch by planting cereal rye, or instead of having to put down nitrogen or use a commercial fertilizer, you can plant clover. So typically looking at my goals is the first thing that helps me select my cover crop. Then also management level. How are you going to plant your cover crops? How are you going to terminate them? How much time are you willing to invest into a cover crop? And also your experience plays a big part. If you are a first-time person planting cover crops, you're probably not going to want to start with annual ryegrass because it can be a little difficult. Oats might be a better option for you. If you've done single species cover crops for a while, maybe try a mix. Just building on your past experiences. And then the other part that might be the most important is your cash crop rotation. So what is going into that raised bed or into your garden the following year? Are you planting something like tomatoes or peppers that are a later transplant? Or are you wanting something that goes in early in the year, like lettuces or carrots or broccolis? So that's very important when selecting a cover crop because some of our cover crops winter kill, so they would be really well suited to have an earlier vegetable like lettuce or broccoli planted in them. But if you plant something like cereal rye, it's not going to be ready to be terminated until later into May. And so you're gonna already miss out on that planting season for your lettuces. So that might be a better place for something like green beans. And the other thing you wanna look at is depending on which cover crop you select, they take up certain nutrients. And some of them provide nutrients. So like our legumes are going to provide nitrogen, whereas cereal rye and some of our other grains are going to scavenge nitrogen. So they can actually take it away from our garden plants if we're not careful. So it's just important that we look at what that cover crop specifically does and how it will affect our cash crops that are planted. So, and along with that, some of our cover crops can be planted at different times. So we have winter annual cover crops, and we have summer annual cover crops. So something like cereal rye, which is our grain, can be planted a lot later into the year and even into November sometimes, depending on our temperatures. Whereas if you take something like sorghum sudan, that's a summer cover crop, it needs to be planted in May or June, and it does not like the cold. So that can help you kind of decide where a cover crop fits in with your cash crop. So I think this is just kind of a fun little chart. Like I said, there's so many cover crops, and I'm not going to cover all of these today because there's just too many. And there's quite a few of them that I don't have experience with. But there's a lot of different options. So if you have an odd cash crop, or if you have a certain timing that you really need, or depending on your garden's location, if it's shady or sunny, there's really something that can fit in every area. All right, so to establish our cover crops or seeding, there's some options. So you can broadcast your cover crop. Most people, that's what they do in their garden, especially if you have a raised bed. I know that's what I do in mine. It's just like going out and feeding the chickens. I get a little bucket of cover crop. I will, depending on, I know some of the questions or comments in the chat before were talking about other things you apply to your garden. So if you do use some type of mulch or weed fabric or anything like that, you'll need to make sure that you can get good seed to soil contact. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have to do full width tillage and have your soil look the most beautiful powdery surface. But as long as, so if you had a mulch, if you clear that off just a little bit, so it's like a straw mulch, take a rake, just move it around a little bit, try and get that cover crop down onto the surface of the soil. It also, you can try and get your cover crop seeded before rain. that can help get it worked down into the soil. Or depending on timing, if you're needing a cover crop for the spring, some of the clovers can be frost seeded. So when it's still cold outside and the ground's frozen, you can broadcast out there, and then the freeze thaw of the ground will actually pull that seed down in. So depends on your timing, but broadcasting can work great. There's also, if you have a larger area, like the bottom picture, there's broadcast spreaders, or little seeders. I always call them whirligigs. I know that's not the actual title of those, but they can spread it over a lot larger distance if you have a bigger garden. Or if you're a large ag producer, or even just have a couple acres, a drill might be a good option for you, like the middle picture. A lot of these are no-till drills. So you can see that he's drilling into, it looks like corn residue. So if you have sweet corn and you wanted to put a cover crop in after it, this is a great option. Takes care of it for you. And I've also seen, so if you have like established like in-ground raised beds, I've seen a lot of people use seeders, like the one in the top picture, that are used for like small grains or small seeds or like lettuces or that kind of thing. Those work really well too if you are wanting your cover crops to be in rows or in established raised beds. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual cover crop species. So the first group of cover crops I'm going to talk about is legumes. And there's summer and winter annual legumes. These actually will produce nodules on their roots that fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. A lot of them produce a large amount of biomass, and therefore they help us with production of organic matter, which is the dead and dying like organic material that's left on the soil surface from the leaves, and that's normally what breaks down and ends up being the nutrients for our plants. A lot of our legumes are flowering, so they attract beneficial insects and pollinators, and they also help reduce erosion. So cowpeas is one that you see a lot of times for like a deer plot and like a forage situation, but it also works really well as a cover crop. This one's a good summer annual, so it's going to be planted in the heat of the year, so probably from May to August. It produces nitrogen. It's a bean, or it looks like a bean, just like kind of like our green beans would. It looks similar to those plants. It does get bushy, so it provides a lot of weed suppression, shades out any of the weeds that grow underneath it. Like I said, it's a good forage source. So if you do have chickens or something like that that you're kind of wanting to supplement or let run in your garden, they love these. It's a really good soil builder, has a good root system, so it can help improve that soil aggregation. And one of the other species that it mixes well with is Sorghum Sudan, which we'll cover here in a little while. So this one is probably one of the most common cover crops that I see in vegetable systems. It's hairy vetch, and it has beautiful flowers, as you can see from the pictures. It's a great nitrogen source, and it also, one of the other benefits is it scavenges phosphorus. So we don't have a ton of cover crops that help with phosphorus, but this is one of them. So it has 2 nutrients that it can help provide back to your plants. One of the other benefits of it is a little more shade and drought tolerant than some of the others. So it can be used in a more variety of spaces. So hairy vetch does vine, so it spreads and creates a very thick mat of biomass. So it's a fantastic weed suppressor, and it also can be used for weed suppression after it is dead, and is a great mulch. for either raised beds or just anywhere where it's at when you can chop it after it flowers or cut it, mow it, and it will make a fantastic mulch. And it's really pliable, easy to deal with. It's great in a lot of systems. So vetch can be used as a summer or a winter annual. So that's the good thing with it. You can plant it in the fall, it'll overwinter in the spring, or since it is a little more drought tolerant, you can plant it in the summer also and have it overwinter. So vetch, because it is a vining plant, it mixes well with a lot of our cereal grains. So cereal rye or oats, or buckwheat, because it gives it something to climb up. It also mixes well with other legumes like peas and clover. You can get a lot of really good nitrogen production out of those mixes. So another favorite is crimson clover. And it's another beautiful one that has awesome flowers and is just buzzing with bees and all kinds of insects in the spring. It is a nitrogen producer and scavenger. It is moderately winter hardy. I say moderate because depending on what you mix it with in the winter, if it doesn't have a lot of cover and it gets really cold, it might not survive. Crimson clover really mixes well with just about anything. You can mix it with cereal grains. Oats and crimson clover has always been a favorite for a lot of, at least our larger farmers, and I know small farmers like it too. It's a great nectar source for a lot of our beneficial insects, and it also helps build our soil because of its root systems. So we've got field peas or winter peas. These look very similar to the peas we plant in our garden. They're very winter hardy and they grow very fast. If you need something in there to last through the winter or something that's early in the spring when it's still cold, these are going to pop up within a week. They're going to produce a lot of nitrogen for you, and they also produce a ton of biomass and a lot of green manure that you can use as a mulch or leave on your gardens as a fertilizer for your crops afterward. So the next group of cover crops is cereal grains or small grains. So most of them they all are annual cereal grains, and they're typically, there's warm season grasses and then there's also cool seasons. They can scavenge nutrients, and typically our cereal grains are the ones that we use most for reducing erosion because they have very thick fibrous root systems that really hold the ground. And with those root systems, they produce a lot of biomass, helping build our soil, and they're great weed suppressors. So cereal rye is one of the most common. A lot of people like cereal rye just because it can be planted later than any other cover crop. If I forget to plant cover crops or if time gets away from me and I ran out of seed, cereal rye is always a great option because it can germinate down to, I believe it's 34 degrees. It needs to be a little warmer than that for it to actively be growing, but it actually will put down roots and germinate in the 30s. So that makes it extremely versatile compared to some of our other cereal grains. It's fast growing. It has a very large fibrous root, which can be good and bad in different situations. Cereal rye is one that I recommend for areas that are going to either have transplants into them or somewhere where you can plant. So like green beans do fantastic. Be able to make furrows to get those in there because it does have that large root system. It can be difficult for like small seeded, like direct seedings. So any of like your lettuces or carrots are probably not a great area for cereal rye, just because it is going to take longer to break down. It has that really large root system that can be kind of difficult to fight with. But for anything that you're planting in furrows or rows, or even transplants, cereal rye is great. It works as a fantastic mulch after cereal rye flowers, which you can see kind of from this picture. So the grain head at the top, it'll have little yellow pockets of pollen that starts to fall. That's when it's flowering. And after that happens, you can cut it at its base. So like Stephanie, you heard her say chop and drop. That's what we call it, when you chop and drop cereal rye. And you can lay it down and use it as a mulch, and it works very similar like a straw mulch. So not only are you scavenging nutrients, but you're producing your own weed barrier. So that's always nice. And it's also a very good nitrogen scavenger, although because it is a cereal, it will take a little longer to recycle that nitrogen back into the soil. So just like we tell our large farmers, if you're going to plant cereal rye as a cover crop, just be careful with your crop that you plant after it. So anything that's going to be like a squash or zucchini or like sweet corn, something that takes up and needs a lot of nitrogen to get going, you may have to supplement nitrogen in the very beginning if you plant cereal rye, just because it takes it a little longer to release that nitrogen back into the soil after it's died. So oats are my favorite, and I know they're a lot of gardeners' favorites just because they're so easy to deal with. Oats can be planted into the fall, but need to be planted a little earlier because they can winter kill. So anytime between August and September is a great time to plant oats. They are a great winter weed suppressor. Oats grow very fast and establish very quickly. So even if they're planted into mid-September, whenever they do come up, as long as we get enough warm days, they're going to produce a very thick biomass that's going to help suppress any of those weeds that are underneath them and hold them down through the winter, even though it has stopped growing and will die with a couple frosts. Oats are also a nitrogen scavenger, and they help build organic matter because of that biomass. They also have a fibrous root system, not quite as large as what cereal rye has, but they're still going to help control erosion and hold the soil through the winter. And I think oats is the reason it is a lot of people's favorites is just because of the weed suppression that it has, and also because it winter kills. It leaves the ground very mellow in the spring, and the residue breaks down really quickly. So this is one, if you do have small seeded vegetables that you're planting, whether that be like your lettuce or carrots, or something that you need direct soil contact and not a lot of residue left over, oats are going to be the way to go because they break down so fast, and within 4 or 5 freezes through the winter, they are going to die. So our next one that's getting more popular is sorghum Sudan grass. It produces large amounts of biomass, probably more than any other cover crop that are out there. It is a summer annual, so it's going to need to be planted during the heat of the year. I believe June to August is the seeding dates for sorghum Sudan. It really likes hot, dry weather. And it is a nitrogen scavenger also that winter kills. So the neat thing about sorghum Sudan is it actually is a forage crop and is typically used to feed cattle. But because of its good root system and its ability to produce large amounts of biomass, it has kind of made its way into the cover crop world. So the neat thing is sorghum sudan, once it gets growing, you can actually mow it and it'll continue to come back, or weed eat it, but it does have to be higher. It needs to be at least 6 to 8 inches for it to regrow. So if you take a weed eater, or if you have like a flail mower that you can set high enough, you can mow this off and it will continue to grow back throughout the summer, and come back thicker and produce more roots every time. So sorghum sudan is a really neat one if you're looking for a summer cover crop. And it also will die with the frost. So winter kills, leaves the soil really mellow in the spring, and breaks down pretty readily, just like the oats would. Our next one is buckwheat. It is also a summer annual, so it needs to be planted past our freeze dates, typically into the middle of May. It is also very fast establishing. It's a fantastic weed suppressor because it comes up so fast and so thick. As you can see on the picture, it has beautiful white flowers. It's just like the crimson clover and the vetch. It will be buzzing with bees and so many insects. And it mixes well with other summer annuals like sorghum sudan. The only disclaimer that I give with buckwheat is you have to be very careful after it flowers, because those flowers will produce viable seed pretty quickly. So once it flowers, it does need to be cut down, or it will produce seed, and you might have buckwheat in your garden for a couple years. But if it's something where you want to use it as a smother crop and you don't mind that it keeps coming back, it is fantastic because it reseeds itself. So that's just up to your preference. But that's my little disclaimer. If you don't want it to come back, just make sure you cut it within a couple days after it flowers, and you won't have to worry about it. So I didn't do brassicas with the individual species. Most of them do have a lot of the same qualities, so I just kind of lumped them together. Most of our brassicas that we use for cover crops, we use as winter annuals, or they're planted in the fall. They are great for weed suppression. A lot of our a lot of our brassicas have like an allelopathic effect to them, which means that they have exudates that come from their roots and it actually inhibits other plants from growing. So this can be really good to help suppress some of our unwanted weeds that we don't want to deal with. A lot of them also have really thick tuber roots, especially radishes. And turnips have tap roots too, and those help break up soil compaction. So when you have soil compaction, a brassica is definitely the way to go because of their tuber root, and they get very long and they typically go deeper than some of our other roots will go. They scavenge nutrients just like the rest of our cover crops, and they really mix well with pretty much anything. Radishes and turnips can be thrown into multiple different mixes and produce and do really well. Radishes do winter kill after a couple freezes, and the turnips sometimes will overwinter depending on the other cover that's with them or how cold the winter has gotten. So just kind of depends on the season, but typically they both will winter kill. The one that does not would be rapeseed or canola. Those will overwinter into the spring. So some of the not so common cover crops that are becoming more popular, sunflowers are fantastic, and they're always pretty when you see them out in a field with some other cover crops. Not only do they bring our pollinators, they have a really nice root system too, that helps break up the soil and scavenge nutrients. Phacelia is a beautiful cover crop. It has purple flowers on it, really good for our pollinators out there. There's also perennial clovers or even annual clovers that people are using. Most of the time, these are going to be in a perennial system. So if you have like shrubs or blackberry bushes or blueberries, orchards, they're using these perennial clovers as cover crops. Or you can have living walkways in your gardens. I know white clover is very popular if you're going to have living walkways. The only disclaimer on some of these perennial clovers is they can start to creep out other places because some of them spread with stolons either just above the ground or below ground. So if you're not actively weeding, they can spread into areas where you may not want them to be in your garden. But like I said, like an orchard situation or like as a living walkway, they do really well. And then sun hemp is another annual. It's actually a tropical plant. So the seed can be a little more expensive for sun hemp because it has to be imported. But it is a really beautiful cover crop that has a lot of great benefits. I will check before we go into termination. Is there any questions?
So Bree, so far nothing in the chat, but let's see if anybody else has a question that they just want to unmute their microphone and ask away, because you've gone through a huge number of different cover crop species, and like you said, that's some of the hardest decisions that you have in your garden is what cover crop to use, and thinking ahead of all of that kind of stuff along with everything else.
All right, well, I don't hear anybody at this point, so I will keep trucking through this. If you have anything, throw it in the chat, or we'll talk afterward too. So that was a lot of cover crop species that I covered. Not even close to covering all of them. Those are just some of the common ones that I typically see in garden situations. If there are other ones that you guys are interested in or that you've used or have questions about, please feel free to throw that in the chat or we can discuss it after the presentation. There are so many other ones out there and I always love hearing experiences with different ones that I may not have tried yet. So we talked some about termination when we talked about the individual species, but there are multiple different ways to terminate our cover crops. So we have some like our summer annuals or like oats or radishes that winter kill. So those are very convenient in our cover crop systems just because after you plant them, you wait through winter till it freezes, get there in the spring and your soil is mellow and it's ready to be planted. The picture in the bottom right is my garden from last year, and that was a mix that had oats and sunflowers and sorghum Sudan and radishes in it. So I think this picture was taken in February, and it's all dead, and it was really easy just to go in, and all I did was take like a weed eater and I just weed eated it down, and then it actually broke down so fast that by the time I was ready to go in and plant my cabbage, there was really nothing left of it. So very easy to manage winter kill species. Another option, which I didn't have a picture on here, is crimping. So crimping is just where you are breaking the stalk of the plant. There are many different species that can be crimped. Cereal rye is one of the most common. So when I talked about cereal rye, I talked about dropping it. You can also crimp. So crimping, you just have to have enough pressure. I believe it's 200 pounds per foot, which seems like a lot, but if you have a couple people and like a big 2x12 board, you can just walk across it and smush it with that board. A lot of people have actual like crimpers or rollers that have edges on them that you can roll over it with a tractor. So there's a lot of different options for crimping. Then like chop and dropping or mowing we talked about. So the bottom left picture, you can see there's a flail mower. You can mow it off, and that'll actually produce a really nice mulch for you. It'll break down a little faster. Or solarization is an option. So the top picture, you can see there's tarps laid out on top of those cover crops. So when you're ready to kill your cover crop, you can take a black tarp and lay it over top of it and leave it on there for a couple weeks and let the sun break down and solarize that plant underneath the tarp. This does need to be done when it's warmer outside. So if you have something that you need killed in the earlier spring, solarization, it might not be warm enough outside quite yet for it to work. But once we get into some of our warmer spring temperatures into probably late April and May, solarization is a good option. The next one, which I know most of you are gardening, so herbicide is not an option. But if it's like a cut flower garden or landscaping, or if you're a larger ag producer, there's always herbicides that are available that you can spray to kill your cover crop also. So just some of the benefits, we've covered most of these, but the picture you can see on the left, the soil is very compacted. You can see the structure is not very good, almost looks like plates, just from where it's been squished and compacted for so long. Whereas the soil that's on the right, you can see all the roots through it, and it almost kind of looks like a chocolate cake. You can see the pores. So these are all things that cover crops can help us work through. So reducing compaction, lessening the effects of erosion, and holding that soil in place. Because our topsoil is the most important part of our soil. If we want to grow really nice gardens, we want to have good, healthy vegetables, we need that topsoil. So we don't want it to wash away with every rain. And they help improve the soil structure by feeding those microbes that are in there, and they produce glue that holds that soil together. Cover crops can also, with water infiltration, they help having water in our soil. They also help bring oxygen back into our soil. And they can help maintain that microbial activity. Our soil is a living structure, and we want to make sure to keep all of those livestock or microbes that are in our soil healthy and happy. And the other benefit of cover crops is it can host beneficial and predator insects. So if you've been a part of this series, or if you saw the last series, or if you're, there's one more speaker, I believe, with this one that's going to talk a lot about insects. And cover crops are a great host to bring in those predator insects and beneficial ones that keep some of the bad ones out. So if we can try and avoid having cabbage moths and some of those like tomato hornworms, if we can bring in the predators to those animals, we can help protect our crops naturally. So here's just a picture of a swallowtail on some clover, and then also a tomato hornworm that has been parasitized by a wasp. And that is all I have got.